The Washington Commanders are just one win away from making the Super Bowl for the first time since January of 1992. My name is Matthew Heiserman, and today I am joined by Jeff Risdon of the Lions Wire to recap the Washington Commanders' 35 to 31 divisional round victory over the Detroit Lions. It's great to have you on, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks for having me in. I wish I was here on the other side of this coin, but it's all good. Congratulations to the Commanders. They played the better game and they won.
Yeah, we're having some technical difficulties on my screen, but I think everything is all right now. But let's get right into this. There's obviously one thing that we need to talk about, and that's Jared Goff's turnover issues. He threw 3 interceptions in this game, which is the same amount of interceptions that he had throughout the last 8 weeks of the regular season combined. He also fumbled the ball in the red zone following a Dorrance Armstrong strip sack late in the first quarter. What were some of the factors that led to all these turnovers?
I think some of it was pressure. I thought the Commanders' defensive front was able to get to Goff a little bit too easily. I think the interior pressure specifically. Goff is a guy that likes to have a comfortable pocket in front of him. He can step up. He can survey the field. He didn't really get a chance to do that. The first interception was just a dead overthrow. He missed him. Overthrew 6'5" Tim Patrick pretty badly. And that doesn't happen without some pressure in his face. And I think that was one of the big keys for me was that he didn't have places to step up. He didn't have places to, clean throwing lanes. Couldn't quite get rid of the ball a couple of times when he wanted to. He had to hold on to it for an extra second. The long pass that he missed to Jameson Williams over the top was another one where, they make that throw routinely, but they missed that one because the timing was just a little bit off. And that was a pretty consistent theme throughout the day. And it's, that Goff is a guy who has to have conditions right in order to be at his best. And Washington did a very good job of disrupting that.
Yeah, now, of course, Jared Goff took a big hit by Frankie Louvu on Quan Martin's pick six. Goff had to go into the blue medical tent before returning a little later in the game. Do you think that hit affected him throughout the remainder of the game, despite him being able to continue playing?
Yeah, I do. I think it was something where he hasn't been hit like that in a long time, if ever. And he did pass concussion protocol, so there's no concern about that. But yeah, he wasn't right after that. And whether it was just the shock of getting popped like that, or it just threw him off his game. But yeah, there was something that wasn't right, and there was a noticeable decline in his play after that. Again, he cleared concussion protocol, so it's one of those things where maybe it got into his head a little bit, like, oh crap, they've hit me more than I have been. And again, the pressure. Detroit's strength of their offense has been their offensive line throughout this entire run that we've had very nicely, and it wasn't a strength, especially in the passing game against Washington. That's one of the reasons why y'all are still playing.
Yeah, now, of course, Jared Goff was not the only one throwing interceptions this game for Detroit. You also have to look at that Jameson Williams interception, and this was a super costly play for Detroit. It was obviously supposed to be a trick play, and at this point in the game, Washington was leading 38-28 with just over 12 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. And I understand that the play had a lot of potential, but taking that risk while being down 10 in a winner go home game is a very questionable decision by Ben Johnson, in my opinion. And if Detroit did score on that drive, we're looking at a 3-point game with around 10 minutes remaining. The Lions are obviously a team known for taking many risks. And while they do pay off sometimes, was this an appropriate situation to take one of those risks?
No, it was a terrible call. Terrible time to do it. Jameson Williams has to know better. But I think also in that case, Ben Johnson needs to understand that Jameson Williams is not a guy who's known for his decision making. Maybe, there's a time and place for it. That was not it, not at all. It was very, very frustrating. That was one of those where I try to keep an even keel most of the time throughout a game. That was one where I was really tempted to throw something at the TV because you can't do that. Bad call, and it was very costly because, like you said, the Lions had some momentum. They had a chance to make it a one-score game again. Maybe the defense, as injury depleted as it was, could rise up and force a Jane Daniels mistake or take advantage of something. Make Tressway punt again, which he barely did. I think he did one. And that just at that point the game was over for all intents and purposes, and it shouldn't have been at that point. That was a rough call, bad decision.
Yeah, now a big reason Washington won this game was due to their extremely productive first half. In the first half alone, the Commanders had a combined 312 yards and 15 first downs, 31 total points. Obviously, before this game, Detroit gave up just 6 first half points against the Minnesota Vikings in Week 18. What went wrong for the Lions defense in this matchup?
The second play of the game, they lost their best cornerback in Amik Robertson.
Yeah.
He was already starting because Carlton Davis was out. The pass rush was non-existent. I was listening to the Lions radio feed as I watched. The Lions had one QB pressure in the first half. One.
Yeah.
Didn't touch Jaden Daniels. Can't do that, especially when you're blitzing, and they did blitz some. That's a recipe for disaster. So you're already down. Look, the list of the Lions have had a very good starting 11 defense on injured reserve already going into this game. So they needed all hands on deck. They needed all those guys to play well, and guys who had stepped up. Al-Qadim Muhammad was a guy who played very well against Minnesota, both weeks against Minnesota. There was guys like Zadarius Smith disappeared. He was non-existent in this game. He had to step up, and he wasn't there. And the Commanders, their offensive line deserves some credit. I thought they did a very good job, but it was way too easy for Daniels and that offense to move down the field and hit big plays. Just okay. The Terry McLaurin touchdown. There should have been 3 Lions over there. There was one. Like there was a whole lot of miscommunication, and some of that is because that they don't have regular people playing there. Morris Norris, who was an undrafted rookie free agent from Fresno State, he played the entire second half as your starting underneath safety. Like that. There's only so much you can ask of these guys. And Washington's a very talented offense. They're very explosive. They're built on explosive plays. They're built also on the long drives. That's something that Washington did a very good job of all season. Was the 10-play 77-yard drive. I believe Washington was 3rd in time of possession, and 4th in amount of 10-play plus drives. Like that, not only is it going to get you productive against the Lions defense, keeps the Lions offense from getting into a rhythm off the field. And I think that was a big key.
Yeah. Now you mentioned that one pressure in the entire first half, and I do want to kind of dive a little deeper into that. Jaden Daniels has struggled against the blitz in the past. He looked solid against it against Tampa Bay last week, but in general, he has struggled against the blitz. And this season, according to PFF, he had 75 scrambles, which is over 25 scrambles more than the second highest quarterback, which was Bo Nix. So if defenses are able to use the blitz, there's a good chance that Daniels isn't necessarily the best at reacting to it. And, since we've seen this out of Daniels in the past, is that something you would have liked to see more from Detroit in this contest? And how would they have done that?
I would have liked to have seen more effective blitzing. I think Ifeatu Malifon, who the safety linebacker hybrid type star player, elephant player, if you're at Alabama, is really good at that. I think he blitzed once in the game before he left with his latest injury. And Brian Branch, spectacular blitzer. Alex Anzalone, very good A-gap blitzer. They didn't really do a lot of that. It felt like they were doing some more overloads, and it's not a great decision against a guy who can run around it. I think some of it was also the ends lost contain a lot when they did blitz and start to get a little bit of pressure on him. And Daniels was very, very capable of seeing where he needed to go. His escape routes were very evident for him. In watching some of the Washington games this season, the teams that were effective at doing that against him, they kept him guessing. It's like, where's my route? Where's my hot? What's my option here? I don't think Detroit did a very good job of limiting his options when they did blitz and try to get home.
Yeah, now I want to talk a little bit about Detroit's run game in this one. Obviously, this was an amazing game for Jahmyr Gibbs, who had 175 scrimmage yards and 2 touchdowns, including 105 rushing yards. However, things weren't so great for David Montgomery. This was obviously Montgomery's first game back in over a month after suffering a knee injury. But I know you mentioned this on one of your articles with the Lions wire. He gained just 4 yards on his first 4 carries and was hit before the line of scrimmage on 3 of them. Montgomery finished the game with 7 carries for just 28 rushing yards. Do you think Montgomery was still dealing with that knee injury, and how much did that potentially affect his performance?
Yeah, I think he was a little rusty. That was, look, we were very happy to have him back. He's a fantastic running back. He did not have a good game, especially with a good start. And I think also just the first play, who was it? Was it Dante Fowler that read the formation? And look, rookie right guard Christian Mahogany on that play is designed to block behind left tackle Taylor Decker.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if the defense reads that, he's dead to rights. And that was another one where most Lions fans, and I'm throwing myself in that, did not think that Ben Johnson called a very smart game based on the personnel that he had. And that was a great example of it. And that was the first play of the game, where you're running a very complex run for a running back that hasn't touched the ball, hasn't been hit in over a month. You're asking a rookie guard to make a darn near impossible reach block. Like the complexity of the offense played into the problems that David Montgomery had in that game. And also, you got to tip your hat to the Washington defense for making the plays too, because there has been many times where Montgomery has been dead to rights in the backfield, and the Bears and the Seahawks, and especially the Cowboys, couldn't get him down. Washington got him down. Good for them.
Now another big story of this game was how aggressive Dan Quinn was on 4th down. On Saturday, the Commanders went 3 of 4 on 4th down, and Washington also attempted 5 4th downs against Tampa Bay in the wild card round. Obviously, Dan Campbell and the Lions are, as I mentioned earlier, known to be an extremely aggressive team. And to me, it felt like Quinn was almost trying to replicate their level of intensity in this one. Do you think this game would have been a different outcome if Washington just decided to take the points rather than risk it all these times?
Oh, absolutely. Because that's, when you get those points and when you're successful at it, that puts a lot more pressure on the Lions to, there's also, the feeling of like, okay, we got you to 3rd down. And this works for Detroit so well. When you have, 2nd and 14, and you're going to go for it on 4th down before you do 3rd down, it gives you so many more options of what you can do. Like, you're not going to try to get it all on one play necessarily. And I thought Washington did a little bit of that too. That's a different look for Dan Quinn, and it's a good look for him because when you've got a quarterback like you do and you've got weapons like you do, why not? Look, especially when your kicker is Zane Gonzalez. He's no offense, Zane, because I know him back from his Cleveland days. He was the kicker for the winless Browns back in the day, and I covered that team. He's not the most reliable guy, so why not? Even if you fail and miss a couple, and this is something that Dan Campbell has espoused, and I am a big believer in it. When you go for it on 4th down, not only are you sending the message that you're being aggressive on offense, you're telling your defense that, hey, I believe y'all are going to get this stop. I have faith in you. That empowers your defense. They're like, man, coach has got our back. You can see that. You can very much see that effect, and you can see it with Washington too. So it's breaking character a little bit, but it's if it's finding a new character for Dan Quinn, good for him, man. That's going to make him a better coach.
And of course, we have to spend some time talking about Jaden Daniels. In this game, he went 22 of 31, throwing for 299 yards
He was
and
so good.
2 touchdowns. He also added over 50 yards on the ground. There are obviously so many things to praise about Jaden when it comes to his game, but what would you say has impressed you the most about his performance in this matchup?
It wasn't too big for him. He was ready, and with a rookie quarterback, you never really know. Obviously, he just beat a good Tampa Bay team that has beaten both. They won in Detroit earlier this year. They beat Philadelphia. Like Tampa's a high variance team, but that's a good football team. And it wasn't too big for him then, and it wasn't too big for him in Detroit with perhaps the most raucous fan base in the league in an indoor setting, which isn't all that familiar for him either. Washington plays outside. Most of their games are outside. Not all, but a good proportion of them.
Yeah.
That's impressive, man. He's got that, and not everybody has that. And that he was my number one quarterback coming out last year, pretty easily, pretty handily, and well, it's bitter right now for me. I'm kind of glad for the validation because he's got a chance to be really, really good for a really long time, and that's the way that the league has come and turned over with quarterbacks recently. Everybody's always looking for the next great one. Y'all might have him, and that's a great spot to be in because when you've got your quarterback fixed, so much else becomes so much easier. We've got that in Detroit with Jared Goff. We had Matthew Stafford for years. He was fantastic. Happy for him that he's moved on. There was a lot of questions about if Jared Goff could be that for Detroit, and when he did prove to be that, he's been fantastic for Detroit. Everything else gets that much easier to build around your team and to just relax when you know that you've got your quarterback. And Washington's got that. That was good, man.
I mean, what he's done so far, not just this game, this entire season, is unbelievable. He just doesn't look phased. I mean, he brings an extra level of poise that you don't see out of 10-year veterans who have made the playoffs 5 times in their career. I mean, he's just unbelievable, obviously, for a rookie quarterback, and there's so much to get into with him. But of course, we'll save that for another episode. Now, Brian Robinson Jr. proved to be a massive problem against Detroit's run defense in this game. Robinson last week had just 10 carries for 16 yards against the Bucs, although he clearly wasn't 100% healthy. He looked a lot better in this game, and he looked a lot faster. He looked like he had definitely recovered throughout that week in between the two games. In this game, Robinson had 15 carries for 77 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. How much of this had to do with the Lions' banged up defensive line rather than just a really poor job stopping the run?
That was a lot of it. There were a couple of plays where he did bounce outside, and there were the second level support just wasn't there. Whether it was Jack Campbell getting caught inside, Terry and Arnold blowing contain and running too far inside. Brian Branch outran one. Kirby Joseph took a couple of bad angles that he doesn't normally take. Like, it was just a confluence of things. And he is the type of runner that can give Detroit problems in that he's not a guy who's going to dance. He's going to trust that the hole is where it's supposed to be and attack it. And those guys are a lot more effective against Detroit than the guys who are going to try to bounce every run, or they get to the line and stop their feet and they're chopping looking for where they're going to go. The Lions destroy those guys. He's not that guy. He had a good game, and Detroit didn't.
Yeah. Now, I also want to highlight a really good performance from Marshawn Lattimore in this one. Lattimore was targeted just one time and allowed 0 receptions. If someone told you that statistic prior to the game, would you be surprised, especially considering how bad Lattimore performed against Mike Evans the week before that?
A little bit. Evans is a bad matchup for him
Yeah,
because of his
obviously.
size.
Mhm.
Yeah, for real. He's a bad matchup for everybody.
Yeah.
He's one of the best receivers ever, and deserves credit for it. And he never gets it. It's sad. Um, 11 straight 1,000-yard seasons, I
Yep.
think, speaks for itself. The Lions have Tim Patrick in that role. Tim Patrick is not Mike Evans. He's not even remotely close to it, unfortunately for us. Uh, uh, one of the hallmarks of the Ben Johnson, Jared Goff, we call it the Goffense in Detroit. It's cute. Is that Goff is really good about finding the best option pre-snap on any individual play, and for whatever reason, and I won't speak because I haven't rewatched the game in that deep level of detail yet. Lattimore, where he was covering, was not the best option on that a lot, and certainly so he will deserve some credit for that. I need to watch the film on that, but yeah, that is surprising because I mean, Igbenogany, I thought he played well too. Actually, as good as you can play when you're guarding the alternating combination of Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams, who are very divergent styles of receivers. I don't believe he got called for a holding penalty or a DPI,
Mhm.
so that's I will say in general the Washington secondary. I know they gave up 31 points. Played better than I expected them to, or better than I thought they could. So
Mhm.
yeah,
And now speaking, obviously, I know I mentioned that article that you posted right after the game, just some thoughts. In that article,
yeah,
you stated that you stated it felt like the game was over when the Lions had that 12 man on the field call during fourth down for Washington, resulting in a fresh set of downs, eventually a touchdown 2 plays later, giving the Commanders a 10-point lead. What does that moment say about this team? Because obviously, a one seed should not be making these kind of careless mistakes in the playoffs with the game on the line and their season on the line.
yeah. So there's a lot of things that are into that. First off, the 12th guy who was on was a guy who's been active with the team for about 6 weeks. Trevor Nowaski. He's a reserve linebacker. They brought him in. Both players who were supposed to run off
Mhm.
were not on the Lions at the beginning of December. So you're asking a whole lot of things. Now the coaching staff absolutely has to call timeout in that situation. That's a spot where you have to call timeout. You have to, and they didn't. You've got to look. Maybe they didn't rehearse it enough, switching packages like they needed to. That's a coaching failure there. But yeah, that just can't happen. And the irony of it is, we ran Jim Caldwell, who was a pretty good head coach, out of town because he consistently only had 10 guys on the field in key situations. It happened 3 different times in his last season, and that was one of the justifications for getting rid of him. And now we get 12. And by the way, I'm not sure that they could have stopped him with 12 anyways. So it's just frustrating.
You mentioned that it was a poor, coaching decision, obviously. Do you think they were aware of the I mean, obviously, they weren't aware of the 12 men on the field at the time, were they?
Yeah, I don't think they were. I haven't looked at the camera angle on it
Mhm.
yet, but like from the guys, I was not at the game. I was
Yeah.
elsewhere. But the guys who were there and watching it, like none of them were like, Dan Campbell was screaming timeout, he didn't get it.
Yeah.
There
Mhm.
wasn't any of that. So yeah, I kind of think that it was just like, who was supposed to come off. I don't think they really knew. It was frustrating. Shouldn't
Now
happen.
then obviously Tom Brady was yelling, Dan Campbell should call a timeout right now, and he didn't call a timeout. So I guess some people were obviously aware of the situation when it was happening. Just a coaching failure, I guess you could call it.
Yeah.
And after their loss, it was announced that Detroit will have the 28th overall pick in the 2025 NFL draft. Right now, is there any specific player or position that you would like to see them target with this pick?
They need help on their defensive front. Obviously, they're going to get a lot of guys back. Aiden Hutchinson, Aleem
Yeah.
McNeil will be back. That's the 2 best players on the entire defense, with apologies to Kirby Joseph. They've got to get more guys who can rush the passer and play the run on the way to it. Zadarius Smith was kind of hit and miss. I'm not sure he'll be back. We'll see. They do need. offensive line, interior offensive line help, specifically both starting guards. Well, I shouldn't say starting right guard. Kevin Zeitler is a free agent. He was phenomenal this year. Starting left guard, Graham Glasgow was. I actually put a thing out on Lions Wire today. He was one of the 3 worst guards in football for the second time in 3 seasons. It's probably time to maybe look for another. Obviously, Christian Mahogany came in. I thought Christian Mahogany played pretty well as your right tackle, but you got to get some help there. The depth that they have there is not impressive. They absolutely need to invest in a reserve offensive tackle. Right now, it's Dan Skipper. I love Dan Skipper. I will never say a bad word about Dan Skipper because he will snap my neck willingly, and I love that about him. But he's not a start. Like if you gotta play him at offensive tackle, your offense is going to suffer. And they took Giovanni Manu, who's a 6'6", 350-pound Canadian basketball player via Tonga, and with their 3rd round pick in 2025, they traded it to Philly last year in the 4th round so they could take him. Watching him this summer, he was not even capable of starting for the Michigan Panthers of the UFL. So that's a massive project. They got to get somebody better there. But they do need another wide receiver, preferably one with size. Every NFL team needs cornerbacks. Washington's no exception there. But I think building up the trenches is going to be critical for them, whether it's an edge. A guy like Landon Jackson out of Arkansas. Kenneth Grant from Michigan is a great interior guy that fits. Jack Sawyer from Ohio State is another good option. He certainly fits the grit mentality. There's some options. I actually put a thing together well before the end of our season about players that the Lions will probably look at as candidates. That's up at Lions Wire, so y'all can check that out.
Yeah, make sure you do check that out if you are watching. Now, a big move that broke earlier today, it was announced that the Chicago Bears were finalizing a deal to hire Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson. This move could be considered a little unexpected. Not the fact that Johnson is moving on from the Lions. Obviously, that was to be expected. But him going to Chicago, considering that he never actually had an in-person interview with the Bears, what will this loss mean for Detroit next season?
That's a good question. I think we're all kind of we all kind of knew that the potential was certainly there that he was going to leave. I mean, he could have had the Washington job last year had he wanted it. He backed out. Famously, y'all probably know very well about that. I'm surprised that it's Chicago. I'm surprised that it because they still have their GM. They have. I'll be diplomatic about it. Not the best ownership situation. Not the best stadium situation. I mean, they might be moving to the suburbs. There's a lot going on there. I didn't personally think that he would find Caleb Williams incredibly appealing to work with. Obviously, I was wrong there. Their offensive line is about 3 starters short of being good. It's a project. So, yeah, it's surprising as to how it impacts Detroit. I'll just go back to when he got hired, when they fired Anthony Lynn, who did not work out in Detroit. Good man, good coach. We wanted it to work. It didn't. It just didn't. He was not simpatico with Jared Goff or Dan Campbell. It was unfortunate. Good coach. Nobody knew who the hell Ben Johnson was. And when the Lions hired him, they're like, who? What? Why? Go get somebody who's done this before. And they did it then. They can do it again. I'm not super. I am concerned. His creativity and the aggressive way in which he uses it. Now, obviously, it backfired with the JMO play that we talked about, and the fumble that Goff lost was a terrible offensive decision. That's on Ben Johnson too. But for all of the foibles that he has, he does some truly incredible things. And I'm not sure that whoever takes over for it, whether it's an internal or external candidate, is going to be able to do that kind of stuff. And that, like the play where Dan Skipper reported as eligible and went out as a receiver, because Washington knew that Detroit will do that, they double covered Dan Skipper. Like that creates so many other, like the fear of what could happen
Yeah.
with Ben Johnson at the controls, create a lot of havoc for Detroit, and in a good way. And I think that will be missed. But it's I'm not super concerned that they'll find somebody good. There's several good internal candidates if he doesn't take them with him. One to watch is JT Barrett. I don't think he'll be the new offensive coordinator, but he's certainly a rising star, and they've done a great job of finding really good coaches where other teams necessarily haven't. And I trust this regime will find good replacements for him. They need to. Got to find one for Aaron Glenn too, because it sounds like he's going to be gone as well.
Of course, for every questionable, I guess you could say, questionable decision that is made by Ben Johnson, he also has a lot of them that make the Lions look like real contenders, make them look like a really smart team, like that pitch play, the double, I guess you could call it double pass play. I mean, obviously, you know which play I'm talking about,
Yeah.
which was, I believe, a play that the Steelers used like over a decade ago. I think I saw a
Yep.
clip of them using that play, and then obviously the eligible offensive lineman against the Cowboys last season didn't, of course, or not non-eligible is what I meant to say. If that
Yeah.
worked, that would be just another example of how creative they obviously can get. But you mentioned Aaron Glenn, and I do want to touch on that a little bit. The Lions are also expected to lose him. Some teams that are potentially eyeing him include the New York Jets and the New Orleans Saints. Now, obviously, this is going to have an impact on the Lions, but that's not really what I want to focus on. I want to focus on what Dan Campbell does. He loses his offensive coordinator, he loses his defensive coordinator. Where does he go from here?
He reloads, finds guys that he can work with. One of the big catchphrases in Detroit is "cut from the same cloth." With GM Brad Holmes and head coach Dan Campbell, they're very good at finding those guys and also weeding out guys who aren't cut from the same cloth. Defense is a little tougher because Dan Campbell is an offensive guy. He was an NFL tight end. Was a tight ends coach and various offensive capacity coaches before he became our head coach. He's got to find somebody that sees the vision, and the way that the defense is structured now, there are holes, and I thought Aaron Glenn did a pretty good job of patching the holes as best as he could with what he had to work with. And you're going to have to find somebody that can do that and can handle the fact that Dan Campbell's going to go for it on 4th and 2 from his own 28, and it's going to miss. Like you're as your new defensive coordinator, you got to handle that. You got to deal with that. You got to try to clean that up. That's the flip side of it, and not every defensive coordinator is going to want to do that. I can think of a couple in particular that are like, not a chance. Like, nope. So finding that, and then finding a guy who's going to push the player. One of the big keys for why Detroit has risen up so quickly is player development by the coaching staff. It's been phenomenal. It's been unreal. I've been around a lot of football teams for a long time. I've never seen a team this focused on developing young talent and maximizing what guys can do. So I think that's going to be a key job description. And I'm pretty confident that Dan Campbell will be able to find those guys. But yeah, it's a loss, man. He and Aaron Glenn have been together for, I think they were together for 3 years or 4 years in New Orleans before they came to Detroit. Like, that's his right-hand man. That's going to be different. Doesn't necessarily mean it'll be, good or bad. It'll just be different. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, now with that being said, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I really do appreciate it. Is there anything else you want to say to the people watching before we wrap things up?
Just for the Commanders fans, look, I lived in your area for a while. Back the last time the team was good, I lived in Virginia from 99 to 2002. I'm very happy for a lot of my old neighbors and friends and colleagues there. I hope you all go beat Philadelphia because you're a fun young team. I complained during the season several times. I'm like, why are we watching Dallas every freaking week? We should be watching Washington. We should be watching Arizona. Let's watch fun teams. Let's watch good teams. And y'all are built for success for a long time. And I tip my cap to y'all. That was good. Good game.
Yeah, I mean, this year as a whole has just been unbelievable. And no matter what happens in this game. I hope obviously we win. I'm still having trouble processing the fact that we're even in this situation. But
I bet.
even if we don't win, I don't think any Commanders fans can obviously frown upon this season. We've obviously met all expectations and gone way beyond the expectations that were set for us. So it is really just been an amazing season, obviously, for the Commanders and all Commanders fans. But with that being said, I'm Matthew Heiserman alongside Jeff Risdon for your Washington Commanders divisional round recap. And as always, we will see you next time.